Hey guys, welcome back to the Psalms to God YouTube channel. This is Ree, and this is our first episode of the Journaling Hour. I am super excited to get into this notebook and into this series. This is a custom B5 notebook. I made it myself. I'm really excited about that part too. I will probably eventually do a video where I talk more specifically about the notebook and the process and all of that. But just for reference, if you're following along in your own notebook, B5 is a bit bigger than an A5. It's around the size of the US like composition notebooks, but it's still smaller than an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So just trying to give you guys reference in relationship to whatever journal you may be using. This is dot grid paper, even though you can't see the dots on the camera. In fact, a lot of things don't show up as well on camera as I think they do when I am journaling, just like I am writing things out in pencil, and you can't really see those on camera either. I apologize for that, but I did want to make this video in full transparency. So I do actually do pencil things in before I put pen to paper sometimes. It really just depends on what it is that I'm trying to achieve on that particular page. So I would say at this point in journaling and in like my, I guess, hand lettering styles and things like that, I don't really have to pencil things in to write in script lettering. However, if I want that script to be centered, or if I want it to be like flourished, and by flourished I mean sometimes you see extra curly cues at the beginning and the end of a word, things like that, I have to kind of plan that out. And for this title page, at the beginning, you saw me put a bowl down and trace it. I had this vision of this circle with a bunch of women inside the circle, and then the title of the book wrapping around the circle. And so, since I'm doing this arched style of text, I had to pencil this in because it's not like writing straight, and I wanted it to be centered. And my brain was just struggling really hard, which is why you keep seeing me erase it and try again. This would have turned out like an absolute disaster if I had just gone in with my pen. So, yeah, sometimes it's better to just go in and do pencil first, especially if you have a more complex idea or if you're just not really sure. Sometimes we have ideas in our head and we think it's going to look a certain way, but then when we see it on paper, we don't like it. So anytime I'm trying to do something that's more like visually appealing, I will put pencil down first. If I'm just writing out text and it's just like the notes section, then I typically don't pencil it in first, and you'll kind of see that as we get deeper into the journal. But it's better to pencil it in and then have to deal with the pain of erasing it than the other way around. I have multiple big erasers, and then I have pencils that have, like a tiny eraser to get into like the little fine areas. Personally, I hate dealing with erasing pencil, which is why I try not to pencil things in as much as I can. But like I said, sometimes you just have to make it look the way you want to. I will say at this point, just a reminder, if you're penciling things in and then you go over it in pen or with like a brush pen or something like that, typically you want to erase it before you put the pen down. If you're using like a black fine liner or even a black brush pen or something like that, you're probably okay, and it's probably just going to cover the pencil and not matter. But when you start getting into lighter colors, a lot of the time the pencil will show through and it's not erasable once you put the ink over it. So think about that when you're writing. I typically try to do my pencil stuff very lightly and then just kind of like lightly erase it so that you can still sort of see what you penciled in. You can see like a rough outline of it, but it's not going to show through your pen. Another medium that you can use that you don't have to erase first is probably like paint pens. I have paint pens that I think cover pencil pretty well, and also certain gel pens. I use the Sakura Jelly Rolls most of the time, and they also do a good job of covering pencil lines. So those are things to keep in mind. For this cover page though, I am going to be using the Ohuhu Maui pens. I have the 180 pack. It's so many colors, guys, but I also really love these pens. I kind of love this brand altogether. This is actually the third set of pens I have from them. I have their paint pens and I have their alcohol ink markers as well. These particular pens that I'm using now, though, are water-based. The reason I chose these over any of the other ones, so the paint pens, honestly, I just didn't feel like getting up to get them. They probably would have given me decent coverage on the circle, now that I think about it. But they also, my paint pens by this brand are a little older. And honestly, the color is dependent on how well they're mixed. So you have to shake them every time you use them. And it's very hard to get an accurate reading of what color it's going to be. It doesn't necessarily match the cap. And so they are a little frustrating in that sense. So I think maybe that's why I didn't even think about using them. The alcohol ink markers are really, really good. And I feel like they give the best overall look when I do art pieces. However, alcohol ink is very inky. Is that the word I want? I don't know. I have yet to find any paper that can withstand alcohol ink. If you use alcohol ink, the back side of your paper is done. You will not be able to use it. And if you do not put something in between the paper and the next sheet, it's going to bleed through and go all throughout your notebook. So, yeah, that's why I chose not to do that, because I knew I wanted to put something on the back side of this page. So I went with these water-based markers because they would be easier to work with. The colors are more predictable. Also, I have more color options than if I'd used the paint pens. And the biggest reason of all is that they are dual tipped pens. There's one tip that is a brush pen, which I'm going to use for the script lettering. And then the other side of it is a fine liner, which I'm going to use for the subtitle that I wrote in a serif font. So that makes it really easy to work with. And that is probably the main reason why I just gravitated towards them for this cover. Now, the lettering that I'm doing, I am doing with the number 9 pen. These pens don't have like color names, they just have numbers. So this kind of hot pink color is the number 9. And then I'll come back and end up doing the circle in the 147 pen. So while I'm talking about what I've drawn out, a lot of times I think ahead for what kind of font I want to use for like a title page, or even for headings in general. I've been trying to be a little bit more consistent because I feel like it makes it flow better. I used to switch up the fonts all the time, and then it kind of makes it look chaotic for me personally. If you like that look, then, by all means do that. And there was a point in my life where I enjoyed that just because I liked playing with different fonts and I was learning what styles of handwriting I liked best. And, I enjoyed that. And I still enjoy that to a certain extent. But now I typically group things into sections. And for like section A, I will stick to a particular color or a particular font to keep it kind of homogeneous. And then when I get tired of that, then I switch it. So that's why I try to keep some sort of uniformity, but not too uniform, so that I can play with different things. That may be something helpful for you, or you may want the same font completely throughout your entire notebook, or you may want different fonts on every page. But in general, that is how I typically do things. And on this page, I think I went with this fancy script because for some reason, script fonts make me think of femininity. And it's really funny to me. I often find myself asking people what they mean when they say feminine and masculine because honestly, from a biblical standpoint, a lot of the things people say are not there. It's just something that we've picked up in society. It's societal expectations. And it's not really something that's based in any sort of reality. Like, there's no reason for me to see script font as being more feminine versus masculine. But for some reason, I do. And so because that association exists in my brain, that's probably why I chose this script font as opposed to just doing, massive block letters. I feel like I watched this documentary that talked about how when they make stores, they use like harsher lighting for men's stores and softer lighting for women's stores. But they also talked about using like round shapes and curves in women's stores and keeping things like angular and like blocked for men's stores. So apparently there is some sort of association and psychology behind this. Like I said, I'm pretty sure this comes from how our society is built and not any real, like, this is how it has to be type of a thing. But because I am a product of the society we live in, that is the association I made. So I made this scripty font for Echoes of Eve, the title that I picked for the journal. And then I ended up doing the subtitle in this like serif font. And ironically, for me, serif fonts remind me of like Westerns. I don't know why, but think of like, if you've ever seen a Western, like the wanted poster, it's usually in some sort of like serif font. And I guess maybe that's why I think of that. I don't know. I have no idea why that association is in my mind. But for some reason, I feel like it contrasts very well with the script fonts. Maybe it's like this balance of masculine and feminine. In my mind, I don't know, but I typically end up doing this kind of contrast. And you'll see this frequently throughout my journal where if I have these like scripty things, then I'll add in like subtitles that are with a serif font. Also, I realized I've said serif font quite a few times, and some of you guys might be like, what is she talking about? Serif and sans serif are two different types of fonts. And a serif font has the little feet on it, whereas a sans serif font does not have the feet. So like Times New Roman is a serif font and Arial is a sans serif font. So yeah, that is what I'm talking about. Along the same lines, even the color choice of making this pink kind of comes from the programming that our society has placed on us that pink is considered feminine. I am not a huge fan of the color pink, contrary to popular belief. I end up leaning into pink often because I work in a male dominated field, and in some ways I think it's a statement of like reclaiming the, I don't know, because people associate pink with femininity, it's typically not seen as a professional color. And a lot of times in male dominated areas, women typically try to like fit in. So you try to be more masculine to fit into the environment. And I remember in college at one point, I like something just snapped in my head and I was like, I'm going to be super girly and see what happens. And like I redid my entire professional website in pink, and I wore pink to the career fair, and I put pink in my resume. I just went all in. Maybe I was inspired by Legally Blonde and Elle Woods' character, but I was like, I'm not gonna hide the fact that I'm a woman in this field. I'm gonna like fully lean into it. And so after that moment, I acquired a lot of pink things in my closet. I acquired a lot of pink pens, and I just kind of became comfortable with the color pink. But if you noticed from the colors of the logo of the channel, or if you've been on my blog, or if you've seen my face in some of the other videos and seen that my hair is dyed a bluish teal color, teal is actually my favorite color. Purple is a close second, and my favorite color combination is teal and purple, which you can see in the journal construction itself. Those are actually my favorite colors, and it took a lot for me to convince myself not to do this cover in teal or purple or teal and purple. But I really just ended up leaning heavy into the stereotypes of what it means to be a woman, because I feel like, particularly from a Christian background, there's a lot of confusion about what the Bible actually says about being a woman versus what society has taught us about being a woman. And that typically gets conflated. So when people start talking about traditional femininity, it doesn't actually, it doesn't contradict scripture, but it's not actually prescribed in scripture, if that makes any sense. And I think that'll come out more as we get into the Bible studies and we talk about the different women from scripture and we see how they behaved and what it says about them and what it doesn't say about them. So I don't know. I feel like all of that was kind of like swirling in my head as this image popped into my mind and as I started figuring out how I wanted to set up this first page. So yeah, a lot of times I think a lot before I start getting into a journal. I am very much a planner. Here I'm showing you guys that it didn't bleed through. You can see a little bit of puckering from the wetness of it that goes away as it dries. And if you hold the page up into the light, you will see a little bit of ghosting, but it's not bad. And when the page is flat, you don't see it. So overall, I was happy with how this turned out. And so far, it's fitting into the vision I had. Now, if you're wondering about the streakiness, it looks like the pen is dying. That's not what actually happened here. It is a water-based marker, and any water-based marker you use over a large area, you're going to get streaks. If you keep it to a small area, you won't have that problem. And again, if you use a paint pen or an alcohol ink marker, you won't have that problem. You could also use colored pencils or crayons if you don't like that look, but I chose what I chose, and when I finished, I didn't really like how it looked. I thought it looked a little weird, so I grabbed this other pen. This is a Zig Clean Color Dot. It is also dual-tipped. I love a good dual-tipped pen, guys. So one end of this is like a circular bulb, and depending on how much pressure you put on it, it creates a dot, and it can create a bigger dot or a little tiny dot. So I added these dots to give that circle some texture and to draw your eye away from the streakiness of it. And I think that worked out well. It looks nice-ish. And then I went back to outline the circle, kind of like how I did the drop shadow on Echoes of Eve. It gives it a more finished look, and it also covers up any weird lines that I did where I was, coloring in the circle, and maybe I went over a little bit or not all the way to the edge of the circle. This just kind of adds a line around it to finish it. It's kind of like hemming a skirt, I guess. This pen is also a Pigma Micron, but this time I'm using the 02. So for the drop shadow, I use the 005, and this time I'm using the 02. And you can see that you can see this one better because it's a thicker weight. This is a little bit closer to your average fine liner weight. So that's just a comparison point, I guess. I don't know why I didn't use the bowl again, but it turned out okay. So now I'm going to go and find the girls to stick into the circle, as I mentioned. This sticker book is from RongRong. I have mentioned them on my channel before because I'm using their sticker sets for my Woman of God Daily Devotion Journal for 2025. And there are a lot of things I love about this company, which is why I went back to them to get the stickers for this journal. But I did end up having problems with the order that I made. And I'm just disclaiming that. I feel a way about how they handled the mix up of the stickers, but I also spent $130 on stickers. And so I don't really feel like changing courses and getting a different set of stickers for this journal because I've already spent this money and that's what it is. Now, I will say again, $130 is a lot of money for stickers. I will have extra stickers left over, I hope. So there's that. But also, I typically spend money on crafts. I don't really spend money on like nails or, concerts or things like that. I am very aware that many people do not have the budget to spend that kind of money on stickers. So that is definitely not something that you have to do. You don't have to use stickers in your journal. You don't have to use expensive stickers if you're going to use stickers. There are lots of sticker options, and you don't necessarily have to use people stickers the way I did. Also, full honesty, if you don't care if the stickers are diverse or you don't care if the stickers look like you, there are a lot of cheaper sticker options of just more like white female stickers out there that you can get. RongRong stickers are hand drawn, which is one reason why I think they cost as much. And they're also very diverse, which is why I didn't mind spending that money for the brand. So yeah, that's kind of some of my decision making on the sticker set. I bought the quantity of stickers that I did because I wanted to be able to use the same type of sticker throughout the journal. This goes back to me trying to make a seamless, like a blend between things so that it's not changing too much. You don't have to do that. You can buy whatever types of stickers you want, and you can buy them as you go through each section. You could use the exact same stickers in every section. You can do your own artwork and not buy stickers at all. You can leave out artwork altogether, and just keep it simple. There are lots of ways to make it more budget friendly if you need to, and that is something that you should not feel any type of way about. If you see my older journals, you will see that I don't necessarily have as many stickers, or I'm using like Dollar Tree stickers because I made less money and so I couldn't afford to spend $130 on stickers. In the same way, depending on, you know, what your budget looks like, you also don't have to buy all of them up front. I wanted to buy them up front. One, they were on sale. And two, I just kind of like being prepared. So that's why I spent it all up front. Like I said, that did not necessarily work out the way I thought it would. So there's that as well. When I started putting them in this circle, I realized that the way I placed them in terms of layering didn't really line up the way I wanted it to. So these stickers are on pet tape, which is really nice. And it means there's a clear background so you can layer them and stick them here and there, or and make it look like, you know, one person is standing in front of the other or something, and that's really a nice effect. But I think I thought they would fit differently in the circle. So I started sticking them down, and then I realized that, oh, I actually needed to stick these last girls that are on the sides down first, and then stick, you know, like start from the outside and then work my way in. And that's not what I did. But then when I tried to pull them up, it felt like it was going to rip the paper. So I just started improvising and trying to make it work. And then where these girls kind of cut over the circle line, I wanted to cut the sticker out so that they just fit inside the sticker. So I got out this X-Acto knife, and because I'd had trouble getting the stickers to peel up, I didn't want it to stick onto the paper. So that's why you see me put that little scrap piece of paper under there to try to keep it from touching the actual page. That made it a little bit more difficult to cut around the circle. And honestly, I did end up nicking the page a little bit. It didn't go through, but I did create like a little indentation that I could see on the other side. But since I'm going to write over it, I don't think it's a big deal. And like I said, I didn't go through the page. So I don't think that's a big deal either. This is another one of those areas where I just kind of play with things and see what happens. And sometimes I love how things turn out, and sometimes I feel a little bit more like meh about it. This is one of those times where I have like a love-hate with it. I like how these girls came together. I like that I was able to find girls in like different positions that kind of fit together. They're also all kind of different, so they don't have the same exact look, going back into how I like the fact that these stickers are diverse. And so I really enjoyed that aspect, and I feel like they really do look like they could be standing together like this, and it fits into this circle nicely. But I didn't expect to have that much space left at the top of their heads. I thought they would fill the circle more. So once I finished this, I felt bad that I hadn't added more people behind them. But then I also was like, I don't know that I had more girls exactly the same size, and like that their positions would have made sense to be behind the girls that I put there. And so I was like, I don't really know what to do. This felt incomplete. I honestly, I just didn't know how to fix it. So I just turned the page and kept going. I'm probably going to add something to the top of this circle at some point because it feels off balance, but I don't know what to add there. So I'm just letting it sit and in my head think about it. You see me keep flipping back because I'm thinking about it. And then my cat joins me while I'm trying to figure it out. And then ultimately I just give up and go on to the table of contents. So I start penciling this out because I don't know what font I want to use for the table of contents. I'm pretty sure it needs to match whatever I do on the page next to it, which is going to be a quote page. So I'm just putting it in all caps at the top just to block off space for it. And then I will come back and finish it once I've done the quote and can think of how this will tie into the quote. Okay, so this table of contents is not really a table of contents. It's kind of a mix of a table of contents and an index, but I'm calling it a table of contents because it's in the front of the book. And honestly, after I finished it, I realized that I didn't really take into account the fact that some of the information may spill over into a second book, but I will cross that bridge when I get to it. Um, what I planned to do, the idea in my head was that this page would serve to help me find information within the book. So I didn't want to list out every single woman that I'm going to talk about up front in the table of contents. That seemed a little excessive. And also then I would be listing them out like multiple times. I don't know. It just seemed like not the right way to go about it. It felt like it was going to take a lot of pages to convey that type of information when I didn't really think that it was that serious. Like, I don't think I need that much granular detail. So then I thought I will have a section header or like a chapter beginning type of a thing for each letter of the alphabet. And so I can put that in the table of contents, and then I can use the table of contents to find like the letter D. And then when I go to the letter D, that page will be the page that has all of the women listed. And from there, I can see what page, say, Deborah is on, and then go to the page about Deborah. So that is how I wanted to list out the table of contents. And technically speaking, that would be both an index and a table of contents because it's going to be in alphabetical order from A to Z, but also it is going to be the order that they appear in the book. So it would be both. Where I caught a snag is that I also want to talk about topics that pertain to being a woman. So for instance, motherhood, or why women were created, the purpose of being a woman. Some of the topics that we talked about in the Breakfast and Bible series, and some other passages that we haven't talked about. And so I want to include those in there, but I don't know where in the book I will be including them. My idea is that after each section, there will be kind of this topical section. So I'll do the letter A, and then maybe we'll talk about the creation and purpose of woman. And then I'll do the letter B, and then maybe we'll talk about motherhood, right? But I don't know what order I want to talk about the topics in. I don't know exactly which letter everything's going to come after. So instead of just trying to cram it all in a normal table of contents style, I split it into two groups. So I'm writing the letters at the top where it says women of the Bible, which I am writing out now in script with my Monami Plus Pen 3000. It is technically a fine liner, but with the right amount of pressure, it functions like a brush pen. Love these pens. But yes, so at the top, I'm writing the letters, and then at the bottom, I will write out the topics and the passages as I do them. So a little bit of a mixture of functioning like an index and functioning like a table of content, but really just to help me with organization, and mostly like in the future when I flip back and want to find information. So that is how I organized it. Now, if you're looking at it and wondering how I was going to fix 26 letters in that spot, now you know I was going to double column this. I wanted to fit everything on one page, and honestly, like the letter A doesn't take a lot of space. And page numbers, I mean, there's only 208 pages. So at most, you have 3 digits that you would have as a page number. That's not going to take up that much space. I don't need the full width of the page for that. So I decided to double column it so that I could do 13 letters on one side and 13 on the other, which should give me enough space to fit all of this information on one page, as opposed to having to make multiple pages for the table of contents. And that's what I wanted to do. So I start filling in the letters, and then I still realized that there's still a lot of space there. So I ended up writing out the first name and the last name alphabetically. So for the letter of A, you're gonna see me write the word Abel. I'm gonna come back to that in a second, because I know you're gonna be like, Abel, wasn't that Adam and Eve's son? That's not a woman. So we're gonna come back to that. But I write out Abel, which is the first woman we're gonna talk about, and then I think Azuba is the last woman that I write. So it's the beginning of that alphabet section and the end. So you can see the range in which the names go. I really just wrote that out to add more space so that it wasn't just blank, empty space being wasted. It's not really relevant. I have a list of all of the women I could find. I am not going to lie to you guys and say that it's definitely all of the women of the Bible. There are a lot of unnamed women, and in some cases, there are women that are the same person, possibly, or possibly different women. There are people that, like, for instance, I found one woman, it explicitly says that she's a woman, but then that name is used for someone else later, and it's ambiguous whether that's a woman or not. And because I'm not necessarily familiar with Hebrew names, I don't know if that's a unisex name or if that's a female name. So maybe there are two women by this name, right? There's a lot of things like that. So I can't really say that this is an exhaustive list, but I definitely have a list that I've gone through multiple times to try to make sure it's as complete as possible. And that's where I'm pulling these names from as I'm doing this cover, because I have my computer up in the background looking at the list. Now, back to why I wrote down the name Abel. So, as I was creating this, as I mentioned, there are women who are not named. And a lot of times we attach kind of like a moniker to these women. So like the Samaritan woman that Jesus meets at the well, we typically call her the Samaritan woman. The woman with the issue of blood, right? There are a lot of women that are included in this list that are like that. And so I placed them under a letter that made sense. I dropped words like the, and sometimes, depending on what it is, I just tried to make it make sense. And mainly it's going to make sense to me. You can do yours differently if you choose to, but in this particular case, Abel is actually the woman from Abel. So there's a city named after Abel, and there's a story in the Bible about a woman who lives in this town or city called Abel. And so I called her the woman of Abel, or the woman from Abel. So how I have her listed is how you would find her in an encyclopedia, which would be Abel, comma, woman of, or the woman of. So that is who I'm referring to here. But I didn't write out the woman of Abel because that's actually really long, and I felt like that was going to cover like the entire section, and then I wasn't going to have room for a page number. I ended up with a similar issue when I got to the letter F, because there was what I wanted to write was like false prophets through like fortune teller. And that was also really long, so I ended up writing false prophets through fortune, and I didn't finish writing it. So these are things that, like I just kind of shorthanded things that made sense for me. If you create a table of contents, you may want to do it differently. It just depends on how useful it is for you. My main concern here was identifying where I start talking about the letter A or where I start talking about the letter B. So the most important thing on this line is the letter A and the page number, or the letter B and the page number, not the actual names in between, because I'm going to write those out when I get to that page and when I get to that person. So I didn't focus on actually being able to fit it in. I just let it cut off where it cut off and would look nice on the page. If that bothers you and you want it written all the way out, then you may want to keep a full line, or you may not want to include that information. There are lots of ways you can do that. You don't even really have to have a table of contents page if you don't want it. There are other ways that you could make it more obvious where these sections start. You could add tabs. You could color a particular block, which I'm probably going to do anyway. So when I get to that point, you'll see more of that. But I've done that in other notebooks where, like I start at the top or at the bottom. If you have dot grid, it makes it easy to see like the first block or the third block or the fifth block. And what I would do is like keep going down, and I would choose a color and highlight that block all the way to the edge. And when you do that, a lot of times you'll see the color on the side of the book. So if you have like 5 pages that are the letter A and you've marked the first block on each page, then you'll see on the side and you'll be able to flip to that fairly quickly. So that's one way you could do it, or you could buy tabs and do the same thing. Just lots of different ways that you could organize it and not necessarily need a table of contents. It's more so how your brain organizes things or wants things to be organized. Some of you will be journaling in whatever journal you have chosen, and you may never look back at this journal again, so you don't necessarily need organization. Some people are going to journal and come back to it as a reference over and over, and you want to be able to find information quickly. You may want a more detailed table of contents. It really just depends on you. And to be honest, if you're new to journaling, you may not even know what you want. A lot of my journals have unfinished table of contents because I thought I needed a table of contents for something and I never used it. So this is really me just putting this here. Honestly, I don't even know if I'll remember to come back and add in the topics at the front. I probably will have to do that like at the end because I will forget. I'm not very good at keeping up with table of contents, but I'm going to try because in my mind, I'm going to be using this as a reference and I'm going to be coming back to it often. So that's why I'm putting forth the effort. This is also the point at which I am realizing how long it's taking me to set up the journal. So in my mind, I was going to be able to do that cover page, this table of contents, the quote page, another page that I wanted for an intro page, and then start maybe the letter A, or at least finish that 4th page, and then episode 2 would start with me going into the letter A. And I'm realizing that I'm almost 45 minutes into this. I'm not going to get that far because I haven't even began to think of what the quote is that I'm going to use. And if you're looking at the video, then you already see the time length on here is an hour, almost an hour and 15 minutes. It actually took me a little bit longer to get through the quote page that I was determined to finish than the allotted hour that I had for this journaling hour. And that kind of makes me nervous in terms of the entire series. I do want to try to keep the videos to an hour. Honestly, I don't even know how these videos will do because an hour is a long time. But at the same time, when I sit down and journal, I do generally sit down and journal for a decent amount of time because I'm usually studying the word and I'm, usually I'm praying before I start journaling. I may do some praying during the journaling process, but I'm usually looking up information. If I'm doing something artistic, there's also like figuring that part out. So a lot of my journaling spreads do end up taking longer than, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And it really just depends. If you see my daily devotion journal, some of those daily entries do only take like 5 minutes because those are the times where I'm just writing out the information. Maybe I'm reading a verse and then I'm writing out what I noticed in the verse. Maybe it takes 5 minutes because I didn't notice that much, or maybe it takes me 10, 20 minutes because I noticed a lot. But those entries are typically a little quicker. They're a little bit more structured than something that's open ended like a cover page. So there's a part of me that is thinking that once I get to the actual content, things will speed up. They'll definitely feel more sped up because then we'll be talking about the women themselves and not me randomly telling you just what pens I'm using and like rambling on about what I'm thinking about as I'm trying to journal or why I'm making these decisions, which you may or may not care about. So I do have the hope that that will help, but I also have a worry that I will get to studying a particular woman, like let's say Eve, or we're gonna start in the letter A. So let's say like somebody like Abigail, right? There's a whole chapter about Abigail and her interaction with David, and I wonder if my journal page is going to be so detailed that it takes me more than an hour to write that out. And I'm not going to want to cut that and put that in multiple videos, but I also want to be doing these videos in real time and not speeding them up. I don't know if I will just like edit things out and skip to a point. We will see when we get there. Like I said, I have a general idea of what I wanted this series to look like, but because I've never done anything like this before, I don't actually know how it's going to play out in real time. So I'm hoping that you guys will bear with me and that you'll help me to learn and improve with each episode. But I'm also, like I said, a little nervous about how it's going to get when we get into the studies, whether or not I'm going to be able to fit things into an hour. And also, I'm worried about myself in the sense that once I get started, I kind of get in the zone and I really enjoy doing this. The reason I selected Fridays for the journaling hour is because I am a Sabbath keeper. For those who are unfamiliar with what that means, the Sabbath is what God commanded us to keep in the Ten Commandments, and it is the seventh day, which is Saturday, sort of. If you go by the biblical definition of a day using Genesis 1 specifically, it talks about how there was night and then there was day, and that was the first day, and then there was light, or there was darkness and light, dark and day, which was the second day, etc., etc. So from a biblical standpoint, a day goes from sunset to sunset, not from midnight to midnight, the way mankind has kind of arranged the day. So technically, the seventh day is from sunset Friday to sunset Saturday. So that's the seventh day. That is the Sabbath time frame. And so because I keep Sabbath the whole day is dedicated to God. It is dedicated to spending time with Him, to spending time with family, with other believers, praising Him, spending time in nature. But that means that I'm not working, I'm not doing household chores, things like that. And so I'm always available around that time at the moment. There have been times where I've done like Bible studies with other believers and other Sabbath keepers, but I'm not involved in any of those things. So I was like, I'll always be available on a Friday night. But also because I enjoy doing this type of thing, Sabbath is usually when I do a lot of journaling and a lot of the more intensive journaling. So for me, sitting down at 8 o'clock on a Friday and starting to journal, like it's nothing for me to sit down and start at 8 and keep going until 10, 11, maybe even 12 o'clock at night if I'm just in the spirit and like feeling the topic or like, learning something. And so when I was doing this video and I looked up and realized I was running out of time, this desire in me arose where I was like, I just want to keep going. Like, and I'm like, I could just keep filming and then cut the video at an hour and then do the rest of it, and just have another hour's worth of content for the next week. And in some cases, that may be what I end up doing, but it also means that it may not make sense to you guys. And so from an organization standpoint, like I want the videos to have like a clear start and stop. Like if, like, as you see, I'm starting in on this quote page. If I don't finish the quote within the hour, I don't really want to cut the video in the middle of that and then the rest of the quote goes into the next week's video. I could cut it before then, and then this video would have only been like 50 minutes, which kind of makes sense now that I'm thinking about it, but it's really going to be hard for me to not rush ahead or keep going because I just get in the mood and I'm just like, I just want to keep going. But I'm going to try to keep things around the hour mark. So some of the videos may be a little less than an hour depending on where I am when I get to that point. And some of them might go over just a tad so that I finish the page and it makes sense in the context of the video, which is what happens here. So this quote page is the last thing that I'm going to do in this journal. I ultimately decided to go with Proverbs 31, verse 30. I think this is verse 30. It's a verse that I just feel like resonates with me very deeply. I think it speaks to what I feel when I think about what it means to be a woman of God and what society tells us, what the church is telling us, whether it's right or wrong, and how we have this kind of warring of what people tell us we should be versus what God has created us to be. And so I really, really feel like it speaks to the overall theme of this journal, and that's why I chose to put it up front and on this first page. And it is the quote that says, beauty is deceitful or charm is deceitful and beauty is vanity, but a woman who fears the Lord, she is to be praised. And so I think it's just a reminder that a lot of times we get caught up with stuff that's not really important, but the thing that is the most important is our heart and our fear of God. And I'm kind of synonymizing those two things. Like the fact that we fear the Lord speaks to our heart. So, yeah, that is why I decided to do that. In a few minutes, you are going to see me pull out my Ohuhu markers again. I was trying to find the same pen that I did on the first page, but I grabbed a different pen. So this time I'm using the 14. It's still pink. You can't really tell it's a different pen, but it is slightly different. And I'm going to use that and a gray clean color dot marker to write out this quote. I just kind of penciled it in. I'm going to add in some stickers to give it some flair. And I'm just highlighting particular words as I feel like they're emphasized. And just kind of playing with different fonts to see what they look like. And that is where I'll end the video. I did not finish writing out the word table of contents in this video. I am probably going to do that off camera, but I'm just going to pick one of the fonts from this quote, whatever I end up doing in this quote, and then that's what I'll copy for table of contents so that it looks fine, that it doesn't stand out or clash with this text. And then I'm going to take some stickers from that sticker book that I showed you earlier to decorate different white spaces that I've left in this pencil mock-up. And I think that's really all that I have to share. I'm not going to keep talking because I don't really have much else to say. I'm going to drop in some music so that it's not just weird, awkward silence, because my camera didn't actually pick up the sound of me writing, so I can't really give you ASMR. But I'll drop in a little bit of music to finish out the video, and you can enjoy seeing me doodle the quote. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode. Bye, guys.
Alrighty, guys. Thank you for sticking it out and joining me for this slightly longer than an hour journaling hour. I hope it was fun for you and that you got to spend some time in your journal. If you are like me and do more spiritual journaling, I hope you got to spend some good quality time with God, and develop more in your journaling practices. If you're just hanging out learning about journaling or whatever, I hope you enjoyed it as well. And I hope that you will be back again next week, next Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to leave them in the chat below. I am still trying to perfect this format, as I've mentioned a couple of times, so the next video might be a little different as I'm trying to get the hang of it, though I did keep journaling, and so I have already filmed it. So there are a couple of things that I noticed in this video that I didn't really like that I do want to change that will not be implemented quite yet in the second video. But feel free to leave me any feedback that you have that would help make this more edifying for you. And I hope that, we can continue to journal together. So see you guys next Friday. Like, subscribe, hit the bell to get notified for the next video. The general YouTube spiel. Bye, guys.